Knights of Guinevere, the new show from Glitch Productions, Dana Terrace, John Bailey Owen, and Zach Marcus, is finally here with an explosive pilot that throws a lot at us as we're thrust into the world of M7 and Park Planet. This premiere is so jam-packed with lore, world building, character building, and other tidbits that it's going to take us double the length of the episode to cover all the details that you might have missed. From hints of a conspiracy, glimpses of an endemic that plagues this world, and loads of foreshadowing for future revelations and developments in the story, we got a lot of ground to cover. So let's waste no time and dive right in. The pilot opens up with a monologue from a Guinevere, who for now we'll call Narrator Gwen, as it's unclear if it's any particular Guinevere or just one who's not really meant to be an active character in the story, but someone who's observing all of these events with us. Narrator Gwen speaks of a princess who's held prisoner in a tower, held hostage by complicated machines who run on blood and fear, which at face value we could assume are the Guineveres, or at least androids like the Gwens, but given that they seem to be relatively new at the time of this flashback, I believe it may actually be referring to different androids, similar to the one who faces off against Gwen at the end of the episode. The narrator informs us that the princess spends her time playing games and pretending that she isn't scared of her situation, but is actually in dire need of rescue. Now, the scene plays out to make it seem as if the damsel in distress isn't actually Olivia Park, but the defective Guinevere that completes our main trio. However, I'm getting the vibe that the narrator is actually referring to the both of them. Olivia and Gwen are both trapped in this tower, just in different ways. Gwen's trapped because she's presumably programmed to be Olivia's best friend and servant, loving her without question. Meanwhile, Olivia's trapped because of her status and lineage. She's poised to inherit the throne of wherever they are in the galaxy, but I assume she's expected to run the Empire exactly like her father did. No radical changes to the system, no challenging the system, just upkeeping what her family started. Liberation is something she's not allowed to dream of. Over the course of the pilot, it's revealed that Olivia has a very strong attachment and obsession with the defective Gwen, and I believe it's for two reasons. One, this might be the very first Gwen model, as indicated by the 0 on her chest, and two, they may have endured a severely traumatic experience together. This pilot sets up a lot of questions, but the biggest mystery they're dangling over our heads at the moment is some sort of event that traumatized Olivia. It potentially might be the cause of her mother's absence, and Orville Park is attempting to atone for his sins by creating Park Planet and the Guineveres. I think he created something much more dastardly than the android we caught a glimpse of at the end. Whatever he created caused a lot of carnage, and the Gwens are just his new fucked up plan to make it all better. But back to Olivia and Gwen, there are evidently countless Gwens being mass produced, so if one's on the fritz, it'd be easy to just dispose of her and roll out a new one, right? But Olivia is clearly fixated on this Gwen, like a child who's obsessed with their favorite toy. It provides her comfort. Think Angelica and Cynthia, or a little kid who can't sleep without their favorite blanket. She offers to make Gwen better after asking if she's hurt, but we're not sure what that means in this context. There doesn't appear to be any damage to her physical form, but the pilot quickly alludes to the issue being her behavior and refusal to comply with the Park Planet Empire. Creator of Park Planet, Orville Park, enters Olivia's room, and quick world-building tidbit that I noticed, the closed captions note that the sliding door is pneumatic, meaning it's operated by air or gas. Now, I wouldn't think too much of this if this wasn't a show set in space, and if the environmental impacts large corporations have on the world didn't seem to be a theme that the show was interested in exploring. But it definitely seems like it will be. After all, the surface, which is directly below this kingdom in the cosmos and full of employees, seems to be suffering from the harmful output generated by the park. More on that later. For now, I'm guessing that whatever gas that powers these doors and presumably other technology in the kingdom isn't oxygen, and humans probably weren't meant to be exposed to much of it, if any at all. It totally adds up with the whole Gwens are able to mess up your genomes tidbit that we covered when we broke down the Easter eggs on the website, alongside other details sprinkled throughout this episode. Park Planet may actually be the definition of a toxic workplace environment. Kids love it though. Adults too. As Orville enters Olivia's room, she immediately clams up and sports a blank expression. That is not the look of someone who has a healthy relationship with her father. So although she complies with Orville, and is even comfortable enough to still hold his hand, she clearly has complicated feelings towards him, though I imagine she's learned to repress those that skew negative. At the same time, we definitely need to put her agency into question, as although Orville approaches her softly and asks if she'll follow him, presenting an illusion of choice, is she really in a position to say no? Especially if she is locked up in this tower, we are missing a lot of context to their history, something that Orville wants to bury. I am very eager to learn more about the Park family. Moving on, I think there's a lot of layers behind the shot of Gwen walking behind Orville and Olivia. From Gwen's perspective, it may illustrate how she as an android feels inferior to humanity, how her will is overruled by theirs, and that she's not on equal footing with them. She's a mere tool for Olivia's amusement. But from Olivia's perspective, knowing Gwen is right behind her might provide a sense of comfort. Again, Cynthia, Blanky, you get the gist of it. Orville unveils progress on Park Planet, which the narrator Gwen states is a world where fantasies become reality and tall tales become indisputable truths. Throwing another theory at ya, I don't think this is just hyperbole. This is a very literal statement, although we're not really sure of the why or how as of yet, since we don't get to see much of the park at all. I do believe this place has the ability to read one's desires and find a way to manifest them into reality through the attractions and the Guineveres. It's the driving force of the park's appeal. It inebriates its customers with a taste of their hopes and dreams in order to make them loyal and subservient. I'm guessing that's taking influence from Disney and their habits of associating their theme parks with magic, featuring taglines like the most magical place on earth and where the magic happens, alongside the heart of Disney World being the one and only Magic Kingdom. Orville claims that this park is all for Olivia, and that everyone that comes and goes will eventually be under her watchful care, implying that visiting Park Planet even once will somehow assimilate you into their empire. Though, as I've already set up, I suspect that this is likely through coercion and various manipulation tactics more than it is by force, at least initially. After all, we see Andi and Frankie attending the park as kids, and now they're employees living underneath the park in present day, though they don't really act like they're trapped, which makes you wonder why they're in this industry in the first place. Something else that I find very interesting is the blue spot on Orville's head. It's kind of similar to an age spot. Going back to mysterious gases and the impact of the park, this spot may be a side effect of whatever's going on there. As Orville tries to persuade Olivia to sweep their shady past under the rug, he hammers in the fact that she's here now, conveying that whatever catastrophe that's left Olivia traumatized was, at the very least, on a different planet. But hell, who's to say that it wasn't in a completely different galaxy? Hence why Orville is able to launch an intergalactic theme park without his past catching up to him. They're now in a place far, far away from his sins. I think the shot of Olivia watching the fireworks as Orville tries to get on her good side may be a hint to what really happened. I'm just gonna rip off the band-aid. I think Orville, Olivia, and her mother were the royal family of a kingdom that was destroyed by Orville's creations. His solution to neutralizing the situation was to blow it all up and move on, swearing his daughter to secrecy. Now he's using this theme park to create a new kingdom for Olivia to rule through capitalism and brainwashing, I guess. There's just something so telling and haunting about hearing these explosions as Orville alludes to the incident that he's desperate for his daughter to forget. I'd be very shocked if that wasn't supposed to be the show throwing the answer right in our faces, or I guess our ears. Since I'm leaning towards Orville and Olivia both being aliens, I gotta point out how both have purple streaks in their hair. I don't think that's just a matter of art direction. I think it's either a trait of their race or an effect of being exposed to whatever resources Orville works with. Though, given Olivia's purple eyes, I'm leaning towards it being an alien thing. It's revealed that what Olivia wanted to fix in the bedroom is a giant gash in Gwen Zero's stomach, causing her blue intestines to be exposed, which Olivia uses to yank her around like a dog on a leash. Really emphasizes how messed up their relationship is, and that Olivia really doesn't treat Gwen like a person, but a glorified toy that needs to be cured of any and all imperfections. Given the context clues, I can only imagine that Gwen tore open her own stomach in an attempt to end her life after failing to escape the kingdom over and over again.
Very.
It appears that Gwen has programming that tries to keep her compliant, but as soon as Olivia draws attention to the balcony, Gwen's desire to flee overrides that programming, and the android leaps off the balcony in a last-ditch effort to obtain freedom. We can tell this isn't anyone's first rodeo with Gwen running away, as although Orville gets worked up, Olivia insists that the guards will inevitably find her, and she'll be fixed before they know it. But it's clear to us that Olivia is wrong this time. Gwen isn't coming back anytime soon. soon. At least, she won't be coming back without her knights.
Will she ever find her knights?
And on that note, let's talk about the title of the series real quick. Knights of Guinevere. It's finally apparent that the knights in question are Andi and Frankie. The border frame when we're introduced to them as kids features a broken sword in front of a fully intact shield that's parallel to a broken shield that's behind a fully intact sword. We also have the end credit illustrations that depict Andi and Frankie as Gwen's knights, with Andi wielding the sword and Frankie the shield, which is something that I find real interesting, as you would assume that with Frankie being the brawler of the group, she'd have the sword. But I think this highlights how even if she's the brawn, she uses her strength to protect her loved ones. It could also be shedding light on how her role in Park Planet society upholds the system that's slowly killing them. Hence the billboard that reads, "We can't do it without you." And I assume Andi wielding the sword circles back to her profession as a scientist working in the labs. Her mind is her greatest weapon. It also reflects that, as someone involved with the engineering of the androids, she has a hand in the creation of these weapons of mass destruction that mask themselves with kind faces. Frankie and Andi's roles in Park Planet are also reflected in the acronym for the series, COG. These two are cogs in the machine, but are desperately trying to break free and make a change. We're thrust into a montage showcasing Park Planet's rise to power, giving us glimpses of the good and the ugly. We see how Orville worked tirelessly to make the base Guinevere design as appealing, family-friendly, and flawless as possible, forbidding any wrinkles or other signs of aging so that she always appears youthful and in her prime. The pupils of her eyes have to remain dilated so that she always comes across as welcoming. Even her hair can't be too pointy, as Orville fears that it'll read as violent. Now, I'm sure others picked up on this, but some of these notes, like the hair, are definitely a jab at the kind of notes artists get in animation, usually from standards and practices. A force that I imagine the Owl House crew had to tango with a handful of times, as that was naturally a much darker show than other Disney cartoons, being labeled as a horror comedy. We see that Olivia took over as CEO during what I assume to be her early 20s. Maybe late teens at the earliest, early 30s at most. She started to make public appearances at events for the company, unveiling movies like Princess Space Guinevere and The Wishing Star. Olivia appears to be wearing her father's coat, solidifying her status within the company and how she's embraced following in his footsteps. We don't get any information on what happened to Orville. One could assume he simply passed away of old age, leaving the empire in his daughter's hands. But given the sci-fi angle of the show, alongside the Walt Disney influence, I wouldn't be surprised if he's secretly lurking in the shadows as an AI or a talking Futurama-esque head. Navigating through Gwen's rise in pop culture, we see that Park Planet announced a live-action remake of one of her films, implying all the other films are just animated up till this point. I love just how well they capture the discourse around modern Disney films. The headline features the quote, "No one asked for it, so we're making it," which sums up just about every live-action remake that's ever existed. There's also a bit of commentary on how corporations capitalize representation in order to make a quick buck, marketing this remake with some girl power. The live chat's fully engrossed in the culture war, with commentators complaining about forced politics and mourning the creativity that was once associated with Disney, I mean Park Planet. One comment reads, "We do not need medicine to heal," which I suspect is related to the blue lung disease that we learn a little bit about in this pilot. Maybe people are seeking out alternative treatments to the illness, or maybe they're deluding themselves into believing that the park itself can heal them. Next, we have a tabloid that throws even more lore at us. Apparently, paper on this planet is made from rocks instead of cellulose fibers. Now, stone paper is said to be more environmentally friendly in real life, which makes its inclusion here feel like a hollow gesture from Park Planet. Yeah, our massive corporation is poisoning everyone, but hey, we got paper straws now. There was apparently an incident at the park that was highly publicized at one point. A magical family vacation took a dark turn when our brother attempted a prank at Planet Park. Pause. Is that an in-universe typo? Or did calling it Planet Park slip through the cracks in production? Cause I myself have gotten it jumbled up in writing videos before, so I'm unsure if this is to show some illegitimacy in the magazine, and this is just fear-mongering, or if this was a mistake that we weren't supposed to catch. Anyways, we could infer that the brother of the girl in this photo tried to sneak up on Gwen and trim off one of her hair puffs, which led to the Gwen reacting too late, and she got her hand cut off. But I imagine things only got worse from there, given that there are said to be multiple uncensored photos articles inside the magazine. Did the Gwen kill this guy? There's also a headline that reads, "Parent shocked, newborn babies born blue," which might be a long-term consequence of Guinevere's damaging genomes and the blue lung disease. It's starting to affect evolution on this planet. There's also a crossword that I'm confident has some hidden goodies that will be made apparent in the following episodes, but we have a lot of ground to cover, so let's revisit this another time. There's this really melancholic shot of the surface that drives home just how polluted the planet is thanks to blue smog. Its inhabitants are forced to cover their faces during commutes. We even see some people wear gas masks. The vibes are definitely dystopian. It feels like a world where capitalism has won a long time ago. Advertisements are plastered everywhere on holographic screens. Although it's worth noting that not all screens are ads. There are also newsletters, alerts, and warnings that give us some very important world building. We learn that the name of the surface is M7, so I imagine plenty of visitors in the park hail from other planets labeled M1 through 6, or however many there are. But thematically, I think M7 ties back into the promise of magic. Magic starting with the letter M, and 7's often regarded as a lucky number. And yes, I've been beating around the bush, but there's an endemic on M7, as the blue smog from Park Planet seems to be infecting its inhabitants with a disease called blue lung, an illness that's on the rise and is encouraged to be reported if cited, which makes me wonder what exactly authorities do with those who contract blue lung, as I'm assuming if there's a cure or some sort of vaccine, it's not accessible to the masses. A strong part of that belief comes down to there being an advertisement for blue lung insurance, showing how big space pharma can benefit from having this disease around, that corporations have no qualms with putting everyone's health at risk, and that they actually prefer it over purging blue lung from existence, because if it's not around, there's less money to be made, and why the hell would they want that? Now, I don't want to come across as if I'm looking too much into it, as plenty of sci-fi stories feature fictional diseases, but I am curious if blue lung was inspired by the real-life COVID-19 pandemic and how that impacted the entertainment industry, including the Owl House crew. Although let's make it clear, I'm not saying Disney caused the pandemic. South Park already has that conspiracy covered. A good stretch of the Owl House was produced remotely, as I'm pretty sure the big lockdown of 2020 happened when season 2 was still early in production and the series was starting to roll out on television and find its audience. This is also when Terrace would have been dealing with the Owl House's cancellation. So, I don't know. I think it's totally possible she conceived this idea during the first year of the pandemic and the trials and tribulations of dealing with COVID. What Dana and so many other people were feeling at that time was transformed into the blue lung disease in this series. We see Olivia working on who I believe is the defective Gwen from the opening scene, so although the timeline's not clear and this could also just be a different Gwen, maybe she did recapture this Gwen after she jumped off the balcony, but our girl managed to break free yet again prior to the present day. The claw machine that young Frankie and Andi hack into features cameos of various characters from other glitch shows, just in marketable plushie form. We can spot Pomni, Jax, N, Uzi, and Melancholy. I'm a sucker for seeing 3D characters in 2D. I'll eat it up every time, even when they're simplified like this. Andi and Frankie have been hacking into tech since they were kids, and while this paves the way for their career paths and rebellious tendencies, I also think these skills will be pivotal to uncovering the truth behind Park Planet and the Guineveres, as one little tidbit later in the episode hints that if they can hack into just one Gwen, they may be able to hack into them all. That said, I do find it interesting that they're unable to steal a Guinevere doll after hacking into the claw machine, as if she's impervious to their skills. So this also might be hinting at future story developments. The two kids encounter Princess Guinevere, and as we covered before, the Gwens are able to read minds, though the extent of this ability is unknown. At the very least, this Gwen is able to identify Frankie and Andi by their full names and which planet they come from, though I wouldn't be surprised if she was able to identify them through biometric verification, scanning their eyes like using Clear at the airport. We witness a core memory for Frankie and Gwen alike, as Frankie is able to repair Gwen's glitching finger, an act that I believe gave her the desire to become an engineer like Andi would eventually become. I think it's sweet how Gwens are these goddesses who make all your worries fade away, yet Frankie wants to fix their problems instead of the other way around. Frankie may actually be the embodiment of I can fix her. I'm also confident that this Gwen was being very sincere when whispering thank you to Frankie, because Gwens are supposed to be flawless. They probably wind up in a lot of trouble if they're caught glitching out like this. Frankie might have actually saved this Gwen from a very disturbing fate. We jump to present day where Andi, now working as a junior engineer at Park Planet, is being denied service at a store ran by an old classmate, Reggie, as he has a strict no crownies rule. What are crownies? Well, it seems like a catch-all for the elites, those who work in the tower or are so stinking rich that they can afford luxuries like intergalactic tours and frequent trips to Park Planet. Either way, they're contributing to the corporation that's literally killing everyone on M7 with blue lung. And those on the surface take it personally if you choose to work for the lab. They see it as picking sides and turning your back on your community. But that's not how Andi sees it, as she has a bit of a defeatist mentality. She literally refers to herself as a cog in the machine, someone who has no power to change anything. The park is designed to screw over everyone on M7, and this pseudo-class war only serves to distract everyone. The only real way to make a change is to unite together and point fingers at the real villain. But it's a dog-eat-dog world where everyone prioritizes their own best interest, so banding together is but a pipe dream in Andi's eyes. Thus, she decides to look out for herself and try to get some bills paid. Andi firmly believes that she has no real agency in the grand scheme of things, which means her arc in the series, or at least this season, will be centered around her recognizing that she really does have the power to change things. What stood out to me the most during Andi's rant is the tidbit that every new planet is getting terraformed. Terraformed by whom? The most obvious answer would be Park Planet, and I assume they're expanding their parks to other planets, like how Disney or Universal have theme parks all over the world. If that's the case though, are all these planets devoid of intelligent life and thus ripe for colonization? Or is the Park Planet Empire committing even more atrocities that we'll learn about later in the series? Either way, expanding the parks across the galaxy is bad news, because that means blue lung would be spread amongst other planets as well, dooming the cosmos. I really like the industrial techno-fantasy aesthetic of M7. It reminds me a lot of Cowboy Bebop and Midgar in Final Fantasy VII, vending machines and currency included. I'm also fond of Frankie's little animal gadgets like Boombox, a hacking device that acts as a somewhat sentient companion. It reminds me ever so slightly of Palisman from the Owl House, though I think the co-creators of the show just have a love for Pokemon that can be felt in both of these series through these additions. We also have an instance of Frankie acting as a shield for Andi. After noticing she's getting discriminated, Frankie decides to just hack in the vending machine and secure the goods for her BFF, removing her from the scene once they no longer have a reason to be there, sparing her the headache. Frankie is a tried and true protector. I really admire how this pilot set some time aside to highlight the differences between Andi and Frankie. Frankie really wants to be an engineer. She seems to be a natural at it, more so than Andi. She adores technology and loves fixing up robots. They bring her as much joy now as they did when she was a kid, and she seems to literally view them as people, as shown with her hallucinations, which I'm sure for Gwen will be a nice change of pace. Then there's Andi, someone who's actually in the engineering world, but is overworked and burnt out. You know, like a creative working in the entertainment industry. Andi no longer has any love for the game. She knows Frankie yearns for an engineering job, but it feels like she doesn't want it to crush Frankie's spirit, so she silently disapproves. However, Frankie's spirit is already being crushed through her dead-end manual labor gig, working for the gift shop and scavenging waste from the ocean, fixing up lifeless machines that are needed to keep production going, instead of the androids brimming with personality who bring joy to those around them. From Frankie's point of view, being a park engineer would allow her to make a meaningful difference in the world, because it'll allow her to give back to the Guineveres for the experience she had when she was a kid. Meanwhile, Andi doesn't believe engineers are able to make a difference more than any other job on M7. It just pays more. No matter who's in the lab coat, the cycle of greed and exploitation can't be broken. As Andi tinkers with animatronic, it oozes a blue purplish fluid that's similar to the blue blood in a Guinevere. I assume that this fluid is the substance that Park Planet's androids rely on to function, fluid that's hazardous to the average human being. The chore board in Andi and Frankie's home reveals that Andi is a lot more on top of chores than Frankie. It also hints that Frankie might be behind inertia of utilities with the question mark near her initial. This might hint towards Frankie being scatterbrained and disorganized. Maybe she has ADHD, I can relate. But I think it's a consequence of her dissociating, which we catch a glimpse of later in this episode. It also shows that Andi is someone who can take matters into her own hands when fed up. Like if she sees a sink full of dishes and already has Frankie to handle it once, she's just gonna wash them instead of waiting around for Frankie to do it. When she's not keeping merch afloat, Frankie is scavenging park waste from the ocean with her boss and implied father figure, Sparky. He calls her kiddo. He has rules set in place for her, and he refuses to show her special treatment because
You're you.
It definitely seems like he at least adopted and raised her if he's not her biological father. The two are tasked with scavenging so that the park can melt scraps and repurpose them into new material. But Sparky also has his own shady dealings, selling material to clients like keychain manufacturers and other parties that for now are only alluded to, but we aren't fully aware of. The park probably isn't in the loop of everything he's doing. A scene that really spoke volumes to me is when Frankie's gathering waste from the ocean and sees the colorful theme park in the sky pass over her. The park doesn't share any of its magic and good fortune with those that serve it, but instead, it serves as a reminder of the toll that Park Planet has on M7, casting a shadow that drains the environment of color as waste rains from above. It communicates the cost of the lies that Park Planet sells to the galaxy. The imagery actually reminds me a lot of the kindergarten from Steven Universe.
We're taking life and leaving nothing behind.
Sparky appears to be infected with the blue lung disease, judging by the blue spots on his pen. I assume most employees on M7 have it, hence Andi saying everyone's a victim of the park. Everyone just has their own way of dealing with it. Though I imagine there are also different stages and variants of the disease, and Sparky's been able to bear with the effects that it has on him. He's also shown reading a Dirty Men's magazine, so all the gents who are into other gents, here's a new morally gray antagonist to swoon over. Although Park Planet allows for the selling of scraps and other reused materials, they're shown to beat up and restrain a homeless man who's simply asking for food. Homie isn't dressed that differently from anyone else on M7, so I really do think it was the act of asking for a handout that got him roughed up by authorities. They want nothing in this world to be handed for free. Everything must be a transaction. Ah, capitalism. While sorting through scraps with the help of Boombox, again, total Palisman vibes of how multi-purposeful these gadget critters can be, Frankie finds defective Gwen, aka Gwen Zero. Wait a minute, it just hit me. Is this Zero actually supposed to double as an O for Olivia? Signifying that this might not only be the first ever Guinevere, but one that was tailor-made for Olivia after the death of her mother? Although her mom isn't even mentioned in this pilot, I've already seen people suggest that the Guineveres are based off of her, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I fully endorse this as a pretty likely theory. Sparky strongly opposes Frankie's dream to become an engineer in the labs and alludes to the engineers getting into abhorrent antics that we'll touch on in a bit. I think this sets Sparky up as a very important character who holds valuable information that can either aid Frankie and Andi or be used against them with his connections to the tower. The discovery of Olivia's Guinevere brings us back to the castle, where Olivia, now bedridden and clearly at the end of her life, is informed that Gwen made it to the surface this time, being presented with a tuft of blue hair. Olivia panics at this revelation and sends one of her knights to retrieve Gwen. The knight in question has been identified in the credits as Sir Arthur, but I really want to call him Sun and the other one Moon because, come on, look at them! But I imagine Moon is probably going to be named after another knight from Arthurian legend, like Lancelot. Now, there are a few details worth highlighting in this scene. Olivia's desire to retrieve Gwen seems to be the only thing keeping her alive. It appears she's rejecting her food and medication, with broken plates and spilled meals found all over the ground, alongside open bottles of capsules and tablets. I'm gonna assume that for the sake of the narrative, Olivia isn't just dying of old age, but she might be suffering from the later stages of blue lung. And as someone who had to eat pudding and applesauce with my Adderall mixed in every morning before school when I was a kid, I wonder if her android servants mixed in medication into her food as a way of warding off the disease. Even in her elderly years, they'd still administer her medication as if she was a child. But Olivia no longer wants to be burdened by Park Planet. She no longer wants to be burdened by her reign over this empire or the sins of her father. She's decided to stop fighting Blue Lung and accept her fate. But before she passes on, she wants to reunite with Gwen one last time and fix her for good. The framed portrait of the Park family above Olivia's head shows that when her mother was alive, Olivia sported black hair like her father. But after her death and the event that Orville refuses to speak of, Olivia's hair is more of a silverish blonde. Blondish silver? You know what I'm saying. Judging by this portrait, although her mother's face is obscured, it seems like her hair might have been the same color, which leads me to believe that Olivia was dyeing her hair black to look like her dad, but reverted it back to her natural color as a way of mourning her mother, which in return also shows the disconnect between Olivia and Orville after whatever the hell he did. Although Olivia's hair horns are absent in this decrepit state, the sideways crescent moon in her bed frame creates the illusion of horns around her head. The horn imagery alludes alludes to her role as an antagonist, as it hints that despite her body withering away, she's still capable of sinister actions that we'll become familiar with in later episodes. From this brief moment we have with her, it feels like Olivia still has a lot of childlike tendencies, although her child self was stoic and likely recovering from a severely traumatic event. She seems to be a lot more aggro in her old age, as if she's been repressing her emotions all her life and internalizing so much from everything that's happened that she's become a bit of a loose cannon. All of the trauma finally caught up to her. That said, she seems like she still blames herself for a lot, stating that she'll do better the next time she gets to fix Gwen. You can hear the guilt in her voice. That sounds like something that goes beyond, "My robot keeps running away." I bet there's a lot we don't know about this Gwen that Olivia feels responsible for, alongside survivor's guilt for whatever traumatic incident plagued her childhood. Fun fact, the nurse android that bestows Gwen's hair actually shares the same voice actress as Sparky. They're both voiced by Kaylee McKee, who also voices Scarab and Fiona and Cake. Absolutely insane range. You love to see it. Lastly, I believe that these knights were Orville's creation that predate Park Planet. These are some of the androids that were involved in the incident that he covered up. They're so aesthetically different from the cutesy animal androids in Gwen's that I don't believe they would have been produced under Olivia's rule. They also just look older with stitches in their armor and a more steampunk aesthetic. They are, without a doubt, from an earlier era. The end of this episode also implies that these were the robots that kept Olivia trapped in the tower. They definitely seem to have blood in their system, and they're absolutely terrifying, so that's 2 for 2 on the whole robots who run on blood and fear thing. However, they no longer have Olivia trapped. They're under her authority now, which shows how she's embraced following in her father's footsteps over the years. Frankie watches an old ad for the Guineveres in an attempt to identify her latest catch, and this ad confirms that every Guinevere is connected to a hive mind, something that Orville writes off as magic, but we can see is a tangible, iridescent, octahedral object. Whether this is an actual magical artifact, or more likely, a creation by Orville, it stores every single memory of every single Guinevere, which allows them to recall any instance where you interacted with them. The Gwen Hive is definitely going to be a terrifying obstacle for our heroes, as if you're trying to take down a regime. Encountering a powerful android who can put you on an entire army's hit list with just a glance isn't exactly ideal. However, the existence of this hive mind could end up being one of Frankie, Andi, and Gwen's greatest assets, assuming that Gwen Zero is still connected to the hive mind, though I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to boot herself out in an attempt to escape Olivia. But with the likelihood that she is still in the hive mind, this may allow Frankie to hack in and gain access to a lot of info about the Guineveres and Park Planet, including their weaknesses and any sensitive information that Olivia and Orville tried to bury. This shot of Orville and Guinevere lifting up the star harkens back to all the times Luz held up light in the Owl House, notably when her and Amity hold it. We also learned that Frankie experiences hallucinations and is prone to dissociating. These hallucinations personify her gadgets with colorful, cartoony personalities that also appear to be the manifestations of her impulsive tendencies, as they rationalize why Frankie should defy Sparky and rescue Gwen from being scrapped for parts. The hallucinations also have a similar holographic blue glow to the Guinevere that Frankie and Annie encountered when they were kids, hammering in how transformative this experience was for Frankie. Between Frankie's dreams being driven by a defining moment in her adolescence and everything going on with Olivia, this show already seems to have a lot to say about how childhood experiences mold us as adults. The good and the bad, why people latch onto things that are associated with adolescence. Why would a cartoon geared at adults tackle something like that? It's unclear if these hallucinations are indicative of a mental disorder like schizophrenia, or if it's another effect of being exposed to the blue smog or other toxic substances on M7, but either way, the inclusion of Frankie's hallucinations is a great example of why I'm so happy that this show exists and that the team behind this show have the opportunity to keep creating stories. Hallucinations are something that a lot of people deal with throughout their life, but I feel like a lot of the time in media, it's saved for when someone's tripping balls or drawing their last breath, and I think in a lot of Western media, it's usually used as a bit or a vehicle for trippy animation. Now, I'm not saying any of that is bad, I'm just saying Frankie's hallucinations provide a different perspective to all of that I think people who experience hallucinations for reasons other than drugs can appreciate. That's the kind of representation that I want to see more of in adult animation. That's the kind of maturity I'm looking for beyond blood and swearing, although I'll happily gobble that up too because I'm a filthy little edgelord. Frankie and Andi attempt to take Gwen to a lab for repairs when they're confronted by Sparky and his crew. A detail that stuck out to a lot of viewers is that Sparky refers to Frankie as Franklin here, which is interesting because 1, again, Sparky's strongly implied to be her father figure, and 2, we know her full name is Francesca. My interpretation is just that Sparky treats everyone in his crew as one of the boys, since they're all dudes or present more masculine or gender non-conforming, Frankie included. Franklin's just a name he's partial to. Maybe it's his attempt at making Frankie feel more comfortable, or maybe he just wants to make himself feel more comfortable. However, I would not be surprised if this is hinting at Frankie being gender fluid, which is a suggestion I've seen pop up, and I can see why someone would get that vibe from her. With the team behind this show already handling characters like Luce, a gender non-conforming protagonist, and Rain, a non-binary love interest for the hottest cougar on Disney. I'm sorry, that slipped out. I would not be fazed whatsoever if Frankie's not cisgender. And before you think about crying over woke in my comments, not only is this a Glitch production show, but the Owl House was out here scaring nuns on a Saturday morning. What the hell did you expect? Sparky implies that the blue blood of a Guinevere doesn't just cause blue lung, but apparently provides recreational use that has its own thriving market, claiming that the real money is in exotics. I bet this is going to come back up in future episodes. I feel like this stuff could do some wild shit to the body. Frankie stands her ground against Sparky, refusing to let Gwen be sold off to one of his nasty clients, which has some pretty depressing implications that it's common for androids like Gwen to be trafficked, which is brutal, but I think it feeds into the idea that the androids aren't treated as people, that they're denied true autonomy, and that there's no moral quandary for exploiting them. Most people just don't care.
Stop biting me! Fight back proper!
Surprise! He's an abusive father figure. Welcome back, Bellows! These two definitely have a complex and very twisted relationship where all of this violence is normal to them. Sparky wants Frankie to fight back, but honorably, not resorting to any biting, no punching below the belt, as if he's preparing her for quote-unquote real brawls that are with people a lot worse than him. It goes to show that, for them, talking out their problems means talking with their fist, which definitely isn't healthy. We also learned that when Frankie breaks Sparky's rules, he pulls out her teeth. Dude, I really don't like you. Given that the relationship between Orville and Olivia already sets a precedent for the cycle of abuse being a prevalent theme in the series, I'd wager that one of Sparky's own parents did the same thing to him, which is why he's missing an eye. And to throw another theory at you, I think Frankie's going to end up losing an eye just like Sparky. The imagery of one of her eyes getting covered with a bottle cap and that same eye getting bruised by Sparky really sticks out to me. I know I'm not the only one who picked up on this, and for some reason fandoms just love predicting characters losing body parts after it happened with Finn, so this will definitely be something I'll revisit in its own dedicated video. The showdown with Sparky is the first moment where Frankie and Andi truly get to act as the Knights of Guinevere. Frankie acts as a shield, tanking a punch for Gwen and moving forward like it's nothing. Meanwhile, Andi acts as a sword, wielding Sparky's own weapon against him, ready to raise hell. Andi reveals that she got fired for failing to repair the animatronic, though I'm sure people will still give her a hard time for being a crownie. But an even bigger reveal arrives shortly after this confession, as Andi strikes an agreement with Sparky to fix up Gwen and split the profits. When they make their spit-laced handshake, we see that there's some blue gunk mixed in with Andi's saliva, implying that she too has blue lung, though I imagine it's likely in the early stages. Maybe this is why she's really fixated on money and took the tower job without hesitation. They probably provided her insurance, and the salary helped her afford treatment. Now that she's fired, she's going to lose her insurance and deal with the effects of blue lung without any treatment. Andi and Frankie go to the lower labs, where abandoned projects are left to rot. And I gotta praise this moment where Andi tells Frankie to not cheer her up, and it's just like, fine afterwards. When a friend is down, I want to be like Frankie and try to vocalize the bright side. It's not even like I think what I'm saying is bullshit, but I'm always afraid of it coming out that way. like I'm forcing positivity, and I'd feel awkward if I said nothing at all. But usually, whoever's down on their luck doesn't want to hear it, myself included. So their friendship feels all the more authentic when Andi is able to shut down Frankie's optimism without Frankie taking it personally. Moving on, I suspect that the hive mind that the Gwens are linked to might also have the nights synced up, as Gwen suddenly activates with an ear-piercing screech after Sir Arthur arrives on the scene. So I guess that would mean she is still connected.
But they're not programmed to
Scream! No!
I think this line hammers in how Gwen's range of emotions is what makes her a defect. She can feel things that ruin her appeal, like sadness, anger, and fear. She's supposed to always be happy, always nurturing, and always in control. Yeah, when you say all of this out loud, you definitely get the vibe that this series is critiquing the expectations that society places on women. Sir Arthur, like Orville, is voiced by Sung-Won Cho, aka ProZD, which supports the idea that this is one of Orville's creations from before the park. His Shakespearean dialect also gives credence to the knights predating the Guineveres and being involved with the incident Orville's covered up. Something else that supports this is that Sir Arthur appears to be nearly indestructible, as he's able to withstand an explosion and come out unscathed. The only thing that's able to destroy him is Guinevere, the android that Orville created after the Knights. I really think we're meant to look at this display and question what the hell could possibly stop a Guinevere beyond other Gwens. Frankie hallucinates Gwen Zero as a perfect Princess Guinevere, which I think is pretty layered. It harkens back to that defining childhood moment, but I think it's also an honest depiction of how Frankie perceives all the Guineveres, even the ones that look a little beat up. Despite her imperfections, Gwen Zero is still an icon who means everything to Frankie. The pilot concludes with Frankie and Andi rebooting Gwen, who sees them as kids just like when they encountered the Princess Guinevere in the park. But I believe this reboot is about to get a little chaotic, as it ends in the same location as the first teaser, which showed Andi and Frankie scrambling as Gwen goes haywire. The adventure is just beginning for these three, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But with that said, I love the pilot. It clearly left me with a lot to say, and congratulations to the team for being able to unleash this out into the world. I think this show is about to be generational and attract a lot of older viewers to Glitch Productions. Let me know what you thought about the pilot in the comments down below, and let me know if there is anything I missed. I'm always down to do a follow-up breakdown. If you enjoyed this video, then please throw it a like, throw it some high points. I guess that's the thing on YouTube now. And subscribe to the Roundtable with notifications on so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Peace!